Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas left the hospital today into a firestorm. While Thomas fought a massive infection in the hospital, the January 6th Congressional Committee leaked text messages from his wife, Virginia, also known as Ginny, to then President Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. The most salacious of the texts center around Ginny Thomas suggesting ways for Meadows and Trump to overturn the election of 2020 between November and January. On November 5th, 2020, Mrs. Thomas wrote, "Biden crime family and ballot fraud co-conspirators are being arrested and detained for ballot fraud right now and over coming days and will be living in barges off Gitmo to face military tribunals for sedition." On January 10th, after the Capitol riot, "We are living through what feels like the end of America. Most of us are disgusted with the VP," meaning Vice President Pence, "and are in listening mode to see where to fight with our teams. Those who attack the Capitol are not representative of our great teams of patriots for Donald Trump. Amazing times, the end of liberty." There's at least one senator who says Justice Thomas should testify before the January 6th committee, which brings up a whole lot of constitutional questions, not to mention why anybody should be forced to answer for their spouse. Ian Samuel, clerk to the Supreme Court, now teaches constitutional law and with us now. Big picture, is there any reason to believe that Ginny Thomas committed a crime other than being utterly void of any judgment as to what you put in a text message?
No, it doesn't seem like it. I mean, and I have to say, I love these texts in a way because it demonstrates that, you know, old people, whether they're married to famous Supreme Court justices and are famous themselves, all old people are eventually the same. I don't think that there's anybody who hasn't had a conversation with either a relative on the right or the left that wasn't sort of along these lines. And I actually found them to be a little bit charming. But no, it doesn't seem like that she committed a crime. I found the responses by the Chief of Staff to be along the lines of, "Okay, that's great. Well, I'll get nice to talk to you. Keep the faith."
Okay, but in fairness, and we all hope to be old people who are that charming at some point in our life and have young people like you and me who humor us. At the same time, her husband is an old person who happens to be on the Supreme Court and has ruled on at least one January 6th case. Does he owe it to people to recuse himself because his wife has such strong and clearly public views?
No, not for that reason. I don't think so. I mean, you know, and to be clear, there is a background. This kind of family conflict comes up a lot. So, you know, for example, Justice Scalia, my old boss, his son Eugene Scalia, he's a very talented labor lawyer, and he was the solicitor of the Department of Labor after his dad died. But before that, because his dad was a Supreme Court justice, he really couldn't take high government positions because these kind of family conflicts, they get a little thorny. That said, no, of course, I don't think Justice Thomas should have to recuse himself just because his wife has political opinions or even attended the January 6th rally, which I understand that she did for at least part of it.
Well,
the
she's also
that I think people have is...
Yeah, she's also a political operative in her own right and deals with things. Conceivably, if she was involved in something and the justices file their own recusal documents and conflict documents, I'm wondering if this brings up a somewhat thorny issue for the Democrats on the committee in the sense that if we are going to hold family members responsible for the electronic devices of their family members, and they must answer for those electronic devices, that doesn't really work out so well for Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's laptop.
Well, you know, and I think that's right. I mean, and to be clear, one thing I really think people need to understand about this story with Justice Thomas, right, is the text messages that his wife sent to the White House Chief of Staff, those had already been turned over voluntarily by the time that the Supreme Court considered the case where he did not recuse himself. So it's not as if he was actually deciding whether his wife's text messages were going to be turned over to the government, although, you know, I could hardly blame a guy for saying, no, I don't think I like that. But the point is he didn't recuse himself because, as I understand matters, he had no reason to believe that his wife's text messages were anything that he was ruling on. And that said, there is an element of judgment, I think, that goes into this. And there is a good reason to think that if you have to, for example, ask your wife, are there any text messages in the documents that are being subpoenaed here that would cause me to have to recuse myself? If you're that involved in the case, maybe you should sit this one out. Not your wife, not her.
Or that would cause me to recuse myself or be a front page story on the Washington Post. It was interesting. MSNBC had a lower third, one of the things that go across the bottom of the screen. Clarence Thomas and wife embroiled in new Trump scandal. You point out it has nothing to do with Clarence Thomas, it had to do with his wife. But how much of this is either trying to embarrass or discredit Clarence Thomas in a way to force him out or in some way impugn his integrity so he must resign, which seems a little bit improbable? But the flip side is, if it was a Republican Senate, would they be so hard on Clarence Thomas?
Well, I think that, you know, to be honest with you, there has always been a kind of special pleading that applies to Justice Thomas. There has always been a kind of special loathing for him among liberal Democrats, and this goes all the way back to his confirmation hearings, at which time, by the way, he was married to Virginia Thomas, and she was already a political operative. It was very well understood when Joe Biden was running his confirmation hearings. So there has always been, a kind of a special antipathy for him that, even though I am way, way on the left, I have never felt comfortable with, and I do think that there is a kind of special pleading about him that is, I find to be very uncomfortable because it is hard to resist the conclusion that it is in part because he is a black conservative, and that does make some people feel very uncomfortable, and their discomfort makes me feel uncomfortable.
Well, we're glad you're here despite your discomfort. Ian, good to see you, my friend. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.